Yeah, I just want to take a minute to welcome you all here tonight. And I am Ray. I'll be the moderator alongside Akil. He's the technical moderator tonight. So I'd like to thank all of you panelists for taking the time out of your day to volunteer to be here tonight and to share your experience with us. So I'll quickly run through how we'll be running the session tonight. So first we'll begin by asking a few general questions to each of the panelists here, and then give you a chance to kind of introduce yourselves and share your career and experience with everyone who's watching. And then we'll follow this with a question and answer period. So we'll just ask that anyone who does have questions, if you just use the chat to ask those, that way we'll reduce overlap between speakers. And then after we ask any general questions and introductory questions, we'll have our technical moderator, Akil, ask any questions in the chat following the introductions. So let's get started with a few introductory questions that we have prepared. So how it'll work is I'll ask a question and then give each panelist a chance to answer before we move on to the next. So we can kind of go in the order of the bios that you should be able to find below this video. So that will go Ebby, Travis, and then Taheer. So the first question that we have is, could you tell us a little bit about your university experience and describe your current job? So Ebby, would you be able to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. I attended the University of Alberta from 2012 to 2017. I did the Meki co-op program, and I have to say I had a lot of fun in university overall. I mean, school was hard and you can't really get past that, but I made sure to do a lot of things outside of that. I joined a lot of student groups, especially my first year. I joined the first year engineering club, which was like where most of my friends in university came from, with a couple of them from high school as well. And then from those friends, growing more friend groups as well. Because I also did co-op, I got to work in 3 different companies, which was really cool. And it really exposed me to a lot of industry that I don't think I would have had the chance if I didn't do co-op. So currently I work for Husky, Synovus. It's a little complicated. We're in the middle of a merger right now. So Husky is technically working as a subsidiary of Synovus, but I work for Synovus. And so currently I work as a thermal development E.I.T. So the way Husky previously worked was that you'd have 3 rotations. And so I'm in my 3rd and final rotation. And yeah, so my current role is based technically, most of the work is in Lloydminster, but it's a lot of regulatory work, a lot of SAGD work. So I really enjoy it.
Thanks for sharing. Next, Travis, would you be able to share a little bit about your experience and your current career?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, Ray. Nice to see everybody tonight and meet you. So I graduated, I'm very similar to Ebby, just maybe a little bit earlier. I went to school from 2002 to 2007, Meki co-op, similar type program. I also had 3 different co-op placements, which was great. I was really fortunate that my last co-op placement ended up being where I work right now still. So I've been with the same company for 15 years. I definitely wish I would have spent a little bit more time with some of the student groups and being a bit more involved in university. I'm sure we'll get to that later. But had a great experience at the University of Alberta. A lot of the friendships and people I met through the engineering program and the business group as well at the university are the same colleagues I have and people I work with all the time in industry now. So a really great experience at the U of A. 15 years with the same company, so 1 co-op term, and ever since graduation I've been there. I've had quite a few different roles with the company. I started obviously as an E.I.T. And then progressed more to a project manager when I got my P.Eng finally. And then I definitely had an aptitude to get into more of the business aspects of a company and not simply the engineering engineering realm of things. And from there, I kind of got into business development, dealing with customers, and then more managerial roles, which took me to my current position. So the company I work with is called Ferus, Natural Gas Fuels. I think Taheer, you're with ATCO, and Ebby, you're with Synovus Husky. Those are customers of ours. We provide services in the liquefied natural gas space. So we make liquefied natural gas, and we provide it as an alternative fuel, really to oil-based products or diesel. And that's for, I guess, cheaper, more economical. and more environmentally friendly. So that's what I do.
Thank you. Taheer,
Yeah, that sounds good.
okay, perfect. Yeah, if you'd like to let us know a little bit more your experience, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I, of course, also went to the U of A from 2014 to 2019, so I'm pretty fresh in school still. I was originally from Calgary, so I actually moved up to Edmonton. That was one of the big parts of my university experience, was living on residence as well as trying to make new friends in a new city that I did not really know many people in at the time, other than my brother, who was older than me, also did mechanical engineering. So a little bit of a family thing, but anyway, it was good. So I was in kind of a unique space in mechanical engineering when they started restructuring the program. So I'm sure anyone in mechanical engineering now knows the new plans, not the old ones. I actually know both because I was right when they transferred them over. So it was a little crazy when I saw my admission to mechanical engineering plan 4, something that I'd never seen before. So it was kind of a unique plan in the sense that they had 2 summer semesters and an 8-month work term and 12-month work term. So I didn't actually get to go to 3 different companies, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because the 12-month work term really allowed me to get a lot deeper than I had in my 8-month work term. So that was great. I had 2 summer semesters, so a lot of my fall and winters were during co-op. I was not looking forward to summer semesters, but let me tell you, I'd say that they were probably the best ones that I had. It was really where I went from just knowing the people around me to really knowing the people around me and developing those long-lasting friendships, because I still talk to pretty much every single one of them today. Yeah, and so my co-op terms, my first one was at ATCO, where I currently work, and my second one was at EPCOR at the wastewater treatment plant. Unfortunately, I wasn't involved in as many student groups as I would have liked. Now that I look back on it, I definitely would say get involved in as many student groups as you can, and don't always focus on GPA, because I feel like sometimes there's always a massive focus on GPA, which in the grand scheme of things, it's great to have a good one, but also doesn't mean you need to sacrifice all aspects of your life for it. So can get into my work a little bit. So I worked at ATCO. I'm in the pipeline integrity group, similar to where I was as a co-op student. I work on pipeline integrity, of course, so inspections, remediation. I do a lot of inspection work where pigging and some sort of like closed interval surveys and all that. You can always ask me questions about them if you need to know more. As well, I recently have switched more towards a technical sense, where I've been working on a lot more engineering assessments and risk assessments, and that's kind of one of the unique things about ATCO is as an E.I.T, I've got a very wide variety of experience, and not through a kind of traditional rotational program, but just by the nature of the group I'm in, and that's been really awesome, and I've really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to staying at ATCO for a while longer and learning more.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next question here. How did your time at the U of A prepare you for your engineering career? If Ebby, if you wanted to start again, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely say that being in co-op helped a lot. I mean, to an extent. So when I graduated, I actually didn't have a job. I had been searching for a job so I graduated in 2017. Been looking for a job since 2016 summer, because that's what you're supposed to do. And I'd had, I think, 1 interview, and that it was a mess. The interview was a mess, I will say that. So yeah, when I graduated, I didn't have a job, and I was kind of just like applying and applying and applying. But I would say that because I had been through the co-op program, I wasn't as nervous or as worried necessarily, in that I knew I had the skill sets already and that I just needed to find the right fit for me. It took a little bit of time. I got my current job I got the interview in October of 2017, and I was offered the role in December, but the role didn't start till June the following year. So I will say a lot of the skill sets that I learned in my co-op terms served me really well. Not only when I was looking for jobs and applying for jobs, because that also really helped as well, but also like during my roles as well.
Thank you. Just before we move on to anyone in the audience know that you can always throw your chat questions in now, and we'll compile them and ask them after. So if you have anything that you're wanting to ask, feel free to throw it in the chat. Yeah, Travis, if you'd be able to answer that too, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to be like, I'll probably say this a few times tonight, but I always go back to an engineering degree. I think is such an amazing way to say how you learn. Like how do you figure out learning, right? And then how do you apply that knowledge? And then even taking it a step further into critical thinking. And I think so many aspects of our world actually lack critical thinking right now. And we don't need to get into politics or other things that are going on in the world, but I just think um, engineers are really good at that. And the U of A does an amazing job setting you up to do that. Um, the like everything that we deal with in like business or engineering or even in your personal life as you move on relies back on those kind of specific qualities. And I think the U of A did such a good job setting that up. So.
And Taheer.
So I definitely agree with Ebby and the qualities you learn as well as the co-op. They're huge parts that come out of university. I also think some of the soft skills that you learn, communication, collaboration, teamwork, with all those group projects, I'm sure everyone's had to deal with every little nuance of them, and those they really come to fruition in your career as well, where you have to work, communicate, talk with other people, and it's central to what most people will do in the engineering field. As well, one thing that I remember hearing this in one of my second year courses is that one of the big things that employers will look at is Excel. And going through those massive reports during university, you get really good with Excel and ways to automate it and just make sure you're not spending, instead of 20 hours, 40 hours on your reports. And as well, the technical writing and formatting, it's huge in the report writing, as well as even in business cases. You can really use those skills that you gain in school during work.
Our next question. So, and I know we've all done this a little bit, but if you wanted to explore anything else or expand on it, if you could go back and change one thing about your journey through engineering at the U of A, what would that be? So if anyone had anything else to share, like starting with Ebby, but if you don't, you can always feel free to pass.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of wish I did more, I ended up doing it in my last year of university, was the engineering competition. And like, I think I'd been so scared of failing in many ways that I was just like, I won't do it. But then in my final year, I was like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm about to graduate. Let me do it. And it was probably one of like the most fun I'd had in university. And I was really upset that I didn't really give myself a chance to do more of those. So that's the one thing that I would change for sure.
Thank you. And Travis.
Yeah, my only thoughts there, I kind of mentioned it in the opening, was I wish I spent a little bit more time probably with volunteer roles or with the faculty. Like obviously attended classes, did really well at school, but I wish I would have participated a little bit more in the extracurricular. I think that the friends and almost family you build within the faculty, I look back on the 15 years working now, and they're so important in industry now. And having more of those connections would be that much more valuable. It's so much easier to create those friendships in a university environment than it is after university. You're in such a huge community at a common place in life that it's way easier to make those friendships then. And it's way harder afterwards. I feel so bad for so many of the people right now in university that are having to do this in a pandemic, because that human interaction time I found was so important at university. So.
Yeah, so true. Taheer.
Yeah, so I think mine is very similar to Travis's, and I had kind of mentioned it earlier that I wish I spent a lot more time in the student groups. I did take part in some student groups, but the one that I really missed out on was a technical student group, like an EcoCar, Alberta Sat, any kind of that. It really helps you apply your engineering knowledge while you're actually learning it, and I think it would enhance your overall university experience, not in just a social sense, but also in a technical sense, where you're applying the principles you're learning every day as you go. So that's one thing I really wish I look back on, and I think about it. I might have focused to get a few hours to get a few extra percent on a report here and there that could have easily been spent taking part in a student group and really working on those technical skills.
Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll move on to some panelist-specific questions that we have prepared, and then lead into a couple, and then we'll see if we get any questions in the chat, and otherwise we'll just ask a few more questions to the panelists as a whole. So to start, we have a question for Ebby. What are some of the most important technical skills in your line of work?
Ooh. I was not prepared for this question. Okay. In terms of technical skills, so in this role, there's a lot of like finance related things. I'm not super involved in that aspect, but being able to just understand how it's input into the system and like what comes out at the end, like the calculations for in terms of like our economics to make sure that what we're building is actually economic in the future. That's honestly a really, really important skill. I do not fully grasp it yet, but I will get there. So that's one key technical skill. Another one, I don't know if this counts as technical, but being able to write is really important. Right now, I'm putting together some guidelines on like process flow. And so being able to write in a concise and clear manner is also really important. And also presentation skills, also very key because you create a lot of presentations to higher level management. And so those are really important in this role.
Thanks. Sorry for taking you off guard. I feel like a few of these might, so feel free to take a second, or if you want to move on to a new question, come back to it, just feel free to say that. There's
no worries.
Thank you. The next question we have is for Taheer. So we know that you said you're a more recent graduate and you're a little newer to your job. So how would you say is the best way to set yourself apart to your employer on your cover letter and resume?
That's a great question. So one thing I actually trialed with when I was applying to jobs through my last year, as well as the couple months after I graduated, was a T-style cover letter. I don't have one prepped right now, ready for the presentation, but you can probably search and find one. But the way I see it is it's a table that kind of aligns the requirements of the employer and then how you meet those requirements. Of course, you can't fit all the requirements in there, so you kind of pull out which ones you find most important that are best suited for you. And you really, it's a really direct cover letter. And I feel like in today's world, when they're sifting through hundreds of cover letters, it's a good way to set yourself apart because you're essentially putting on a silver platter, like, here, this is what you want. This is what I can provide. And I trialed it. I did get a few interviews with it, so I'd say it was relatively successful. As well, on my resume, my resume is more typical. I didn't do anything too special with it, mostly because it was just centered around my co-op terms and a few of the awards I had gotten, as well as some of the training I had during co-op. I guess one of the things I included was a box that was shaded blue that kind of stands out at the start. That's a summary of your key skills and qualifications. But yeah, I think the main approach to applying to jobs right now just has to be persevere and stay positive, because it can get a little tough to keep going and keep applying. But you guys worked hard to get your degree, and don't short sell yourself. You guys can really, really set yourselves apart by a well-designed resume and cover letter, and just keep working at it, trying different things. I think that's the best way to go about it.
And then our next question is to Travis. Just as you are in a managerial position, be honest, is GPA something that is really important and like one of the main things that employers look at for university students?
I actually, when I think about this question, I actually have a really funny story about this, and don't take this in the wrong way. So when I got into the co-op program, surprisingly, like, you might read my character and maybe you didn't think I did that good at school, but I actually had a decent GPA, and I'd applied to a whole bunch of jobs like you should. And the only job interviews I was getting was like really, really deep research, like working in like a reservoir group and doing downhole research and those types of things in the energy sector. And I actually really like working with people, and it actually didn't like fall into my strong suit, I thought. And like, I'd get interviewed by a bunch of doctors, and they would have all these like different skill testing questions, and I would get through the interviews, but I was really wondering why I couldn't just get like a normal more normal job, more like probably like what we're all trying to get every day. And it's because I had a really high GPA and I didn't have a lot of extracurricular. So like this guy's like a bookworm. He's very focused. He's very simple in the way he thinks. And I just wasn't getting the interviews I actually wanted. So that was really interesting. Taheer had a lot of good points about applying for jobs right now, because I think about where I am now, and when we see applicants come in, is it is really hard. And in this environment, I don't even like feel qualified to even talk about the environment. Like it depends what you're going into, and I'm sure there's going to be more questions, Ray, about the different industries. And there are some very exciting times, but when you think about the energy industry, it's had a lot of challenges in Alberta in the last handful of years, and we're all living this. There's some exciting parts, but it's not easy. Like Taheer said, you got to persevere. I use the word grit all the time, which is like persevere. Shots on net, like you got to shoot lots to get that goal. Like it's not an easy time to get a job in the energy sector, and you really the advice I would have is like you kind of gotta, like, don't be shy to reach out to people that are really good at this. Like it's been so long since I've had to do a resume. I don't even feel qualified to say that, but like I know in our HR group, the lady that we work with, she has like a thing called Resume Guru. And it's probably using some of the things you mentioned to here, like some of the how do you line up like the skills with what a company wants, and really trying to align that, because you'll put out a job application right now and you'll have 100 or hundreds of applicants, and a company will do such quick screening. You just really hope that you come to the top and you actually get the chance to actually show your face or actually speak. And that's really hard in this environment. And like it's yeah, I wish I could share more. It's going to be tough, and perseverance is a great line to hear. I agree with that. So.
Thank you. We have a couple questions next for, like, in general for any of the panelists who'd like to answer. So this one is related specifically with COVID, and I know everyone's kind of been struggling, and you guys have talked a little bit about perseverance, but what has been one of the biggest challenges any of you have faced during the pandemic, whether that be with work or personal life, and how you've approached dealing with that?
Is it any takers? Is that what you're thinking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think everybody's felt this. I go back to human interaction. So, okay, we'll take a positive from a pandemic. If you can do that, technology adoption has been phenomenal. I know, like our age and younger, we're really good at adopting technology, but I look at some of the people in our company that are in their 50s and 60s, and they do this type of stuff now, which is kind of crazy because they're not as comfortable with computers. So technology adoption has been amazing. We're still able to do this type of thing. We're still able to interact. We're still able to talk. We're still able to see each other. And there is a bit of a human feel to it, but it's not quite the same as being in a conference center or being in person. And when you have difficult times and you have difficult conversations and you have challenges and you have stresses, and mental things that people are going through, it's even that much harder. It's a bit of a double whammy, I think, where you're like, people need each other and you have to separate people to deal with it. So it has not been easy by any means. But I think these platforms is doing what it can, right? Like it's still great to be able to have this. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that. I'm sure Taheer and Ebby can build on that, but that's just my initial thoughts.
Oh yeah, I'll sorry if I'm cutting you off, Ebby. Yeah, I 100% agree with Travis. So kind of at ATCO, we've been working from home for the majority of the last, I don't know how many months because I've lost track of it. It's been very long. I think it's around 9 now. So we had a little stint where we were starting to get back into the office, and I really felt that it was a unique situation where I hadn't seen these people in so long. So, you get into the office and you're chatting with people, you're not necessarily getting as much work done, but also that social interaction, going back home the next day, it recharges you. It makes you feel like you're ready to go the next day. And I found that it was kind of a really weird observation where one day I was like not as productive because I was catching up with people talking about, what's going on at work as, your personal life as well. But the next day, it's after having that social interaction, you're ready to go. You sit down at your computer in the morning after rolling out of bed, and you're just ready to go. I got way more done the next day than I had done in the past. And I just find that's one of the key things that missing is that face-to-face social interaction. And I'll share one of my experiences. I actually attended a virtual conference over COVID. It was a pretty technical general pipeline conference, and I found that the networking was almost non-existent because it was just a chat room. How can you network in a chat room? Don't ask me. I was not successful in doing so. And I guess the way companies did, you would go to their booths and maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, you get an email and it's like, well, I heard you forgot what happened in the conference and this. It's definitely tough with COVID, and I'm definitely looking forward to COVID-19's control and when we can start returning to the office. But like Travis said, there are some positive that came out of it, like working from home. I don't know if a lot of companies had that working from home side or that flexibility, but now I think it's a huge flexibility. It's great. It'll help morale. It'll help people become more productive overall in my eyes. And I think having a flexibility between the two and having COVID having pushed the world into that, I think that's one of the good things that came out of it, as unfortunate as the entire situation is.
And Ebby, did you have something you'd want to?
Yeah, similar. I'll echo some of the stuff that Travis and Taheer said. That people aspect was really, really weird to get by. Really rotated. Like I went to my next role while we were working from home, and that was really, really hard to do because I didn't know any of these people. I had never met them before. I never talked to them before, and suddenly I have to work with them on a daily basis. And so that was really hard to do when we first started. Thankfully, it was I think it was like July. So I did actually get to meet my team in person at a distance, thankfully, which was nice. But then I had to go back home and try to remember what these people looked like after the fact. So that was a little bit hard. I was really thankful when we got to go back into the office for the little bit of time that we were able to do so, because I actually got to improve those relationships and talk to more of my team. So yeah, the personal portion was a little bit hard to get through, but like Travis and Taheer said, there was some positive aspects because I didn't have to drive around to any place. I put a lot more on my plate, took a lot of online courses just for fun. So some positives.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
And
We have
sorry,
one
Ray,
last.
what Ebby said kind of struck one thing in my mind. I know a lot of the students here are probably in co-op. So when you do start your new positions during COVID times, I'll call it, don't be afraid to call people on Teams. Just call them. Don't send messages, call them. Call them every single time, because that's the way you'll develop that connection with them. And thanks, Abby, for saying what you said, because that just sparked that in my mind. I said, absolutely, just call them. That's what we actually had a few co-op start in our group today. And I was like, just call people. Don't even message. It'll be a real good way to develop those connections that you otherwise can't over chat, right?
That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, we have one more prepared question for now, and then we'll move on to the chat questions we see here. So this one's a little bit longer. Feel free to digest it for a second. But how have you seen the energy sector, specifically in mechanical, over your career so far, whether that be your university career or your career that you're currently in? And where do you see it going in the future? So I'll give you a few minutes here maybe to think about that, or if you have a response that you'd like to kind of tackle that would be.
I can attempt. That's a big question. So the energy sector, I think we all have views on energy forms and what society needs to, whether it be power itself or sustain the planet. And particularly in Alberta, it's pretty clear in the last, well, in my 15 years or 20 years since I started university, a huge change, right? Like oil and gas was the bread and butter of Alberta, a huge contributor to the country. and we've seen sentiment and policy change a lot. So there's been a huge shift. You can debate as much as you want what the right form of energy is. All three of these companies that we're talking about right now all play a different form. We're all trying to work to a more sustainable future as well. So that's an important piece, right? Like, I don't think, and I like, even from a business perspective, I don't think is any different than somebody being a new grad. You definitely need to pay attention to the trends and where money, thought, and investment and effort is being put, which can help your career for sure, because that's where things are going to come up. So you think about renewables, you think about hydrogen. Do I think fossil fuels are going away right away? No. They're going to be here for quite a while. They're needed in everything we do. But there's a lot of trends in some of the more renewable forms of energy. And we need to focus on that. And mechanical engineers, other forms of engineering, have a lot to contribute to all forms of energy. And I think engineers have a lot to benefit from that. There's so many people that we probably know, and friends and colleagues, that have been impacted so much by the changing times. But I think going back to those basics, right? Your degree, your critical thinking, your ability to learn, there's no way that we can't adapt. And if you're not able to adapt, you're like, you need to be able to do that. Like, I think that's one of the most important things, because the world is forever more fast paced. Information is fast. How things change is ever faster. Like, we've probably adopted technology like 10 years worth of adoption in the last year. You need to be able to adapt to be successful. And we all have to do that, whether you're a business and individual, in your careers. You learn something new and you move on. So I don't know, I'm kind of scraping the surface of what is a huge topic, right? Like, that's a big question for sure.
For sure. Well, thank you. Ebby, Taheer, do you have anything you'd like to add, or? And if you don't, that's all right. We have plenty more questions.
Yeah, I can maybe speak a little. So as I'm relatively new to industry, most my career has been during I'll say a transition in mindset, where we're trying to go towards new things. I'll say, just keep it as general as possible, because like Travis said, it's a very challenging question, and I think the key word here is diversification. I think we're really moving towards a diversification of where we get our energy from, and like Travis said, adaptability and diversification kind of go hand in hand. So I think I'll leave it at that. Just kind of general. I don't know if I can speak too much to the topic just yet, as I myself am only scratching the surface into the energy industry.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So I'll just throw it over to ask a couple of the questions that are in the chat now.
Perfect. Yeah, this first one is a two-part question. So if you can't answer one part because you don't want to, feel free to answer the second part. I think it'll be a lot easier. Abby, we'll start with you. Are you in a position now that is satisfying to you, and how did you find what you wanted to do?
Sorry, did you say I could start?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Am I in a position that is satisfying to me? Realistically, I love technical engineering. If I could do piping design for, I don't want to say the rest of my life, because that seems a little much, I'd probably be really happy, realistically. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy this role. It's definitely a really good learning experience, but I'm really more interested in more like hands-on calculations, stress analysis. I'm also really interested in reliability and maintenance and safety and risk management and things like that. So realistically, that's kind of where I want to end up. I think I'm happy in the role that I'm currently in, but it's not necessarily where I see myself in the future necessarily. In terms of how I found what I wanted to do, I think I was lucky in that one of my co-ops was literally a lot of, the first one was piping design, and the last one was reliability and maintenance. And then my first rotation was also piping design. So I've been really lucky in that I've gotten to do things that I was interested in. I was able to learn that those were the things I was interested in. And then, of course, in university, I just took a risk management course before it was mandatory. And it made me really happy being in that course. So I think courses and then co-op terms and then my rotations have really given me a clear idea of what I want to do in the future.
Thank you. Taheer, why don't you, Travis, if you have something to add at the end, I think we'll do it that way.
Yeah. So, sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah, the first part is, are you in a position now that is satisfying to you?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm pretty early on in my career, so I'll be completely honest. Any position was kind of satisfying just to get my feet wet in industry. But I do think I'm very, very lucky in where I'm at because it was tough. It was tough times to find a job. I was very, very lucky to land. As well, ATCO is unique in the sense that the integrity group, you get to do a lot of different things. You go from project management to doing hand calculations in the same day. I've done it. And I think it's provided me with a really, really unique opportunity to look at a broad spectrum of industries or different roles because I have been able to do those different things. And I tend to agree with Ebby. I'm earlier in my career, I'm much more interested in dealing with the technical aspect of engineering. I think the business side is equally important. And of course, it's how your company does business, the business side of it. But I do like focusing on the technical side. So with my recent shift towards the engineering assessments and the risk assessment and risk management, I've really enjoyed it recently, and I've gotten, I'd say, much more satisfied as time has gone on and as my responsibility has grown at the company. And then the second part of the question, what was that? Sorry, can you repeat it?
Yeah, the second part is, how did you find what you wanted to do?
I'd say that's in progress. Just working, a lot of research. One thing is looking online, seeing the career paths of what a mechanical engineer can be, as well looking on LinkedIn, looking at what other mechanical engineers, reaching out to your network, doing online courses. Like one thing I've kind of taken a bit of a step into is machine learning and data science. I've been learning how to code in Python, learning how to code in R, as well as learning some VBA just because Excel will forever be useful. And so I think just trying new things, whether that's online courses, talking to people, etc., that's the best way to really figure out what you want to do.
Did you want me to add to that, Nikhil?
Yes, Travis, please add as much as you can.
Yeah, so like obviously I've been fortunate to be working for a little bit now. I don't want to go I don't want to go too far into this because I think there's going to be other questions where we're going to maybe talk about some of these things. But the some of the things that Ebby and Taheer are talking about are really interesting because I was fortunate where I started my career in a very technical role, building things, and really focused on the operational efficiencies, making sure it works and making sure it's safe. And then as time went on, I tried to see the other side of that, which is the economics of it. And then I saw the other side of it, which is trying to sell it to somebody or a customer. So a really interesting dynamic there. I would say I'm very satisfied in my career, for sure. But there's so much to learn because so much has changed. Even though I'm young, it's still so much has changed. Everything that Taheer is saying, I'm behind you. Like it's all these different things. I'll always say it. Every company is a technology company now. Everybody embraces technology. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you produce oil or if you're Amazon or if you're an airline, or if you're even like a little small ma and pa online store. You're using technology in some way to enhance your business, and you need to be successful these days. So like it's just always learning new things to continue to do things. And if people have the desire to do it, I really I really hope that people have the opportunity to kind of see the different sides of things, right? Like, because there's so many interesting dynamics that go into so many of the things we do every day, whether it be customer pressure, the financing, or the business side of it, and trying to balance an engineering decision. So yeah, it's great to get that full experience for sure. Approach for applying for jobs. I'm just going to kind of touch on this a little bit. Tricky one, and I don't know what this looks like today, because today is so different than even 2 years ago was, is like corporate culture, like where I work and where we're at ATCO and Synovus Husky, like these are companies I interact with all the time. Love the corporate culture, and it's probably a desire that we all have, and we love that interaction with our corporation. And some of those softer traits are becoming more and more important in business. And this was not like I remember coming out of school, and this was not really something you thought about. It was more like, what am I going to do? What's my job? What's my responsibility? How much do I make? But a lot of those more softer factors, I think, are so much more important right now. And when you think about trying to ride out the ups and downs of whatever's going on, having that corporate culture is so important, and kind of that fabric. And I think it gives everybody such greater qualities. And it's not easy today because you're trying to read this through this type of a format, but like whatever ways you can figure that out is very important, because you're looking for a job, you're trying to figure out what's out there, what does this look like. Like Taheer said, you're just happy to get a job sometimes. You're kind of taking a shotgun approach and you just want to get something. But you really want to just understand whatever you can read. Like there's so much online now, whether it be like a lot of companies have to put out ESG and more of the softer sides of their companies, and really trying to read about what they're about and what are their core values, what's their culture like. Because I just think that's so important. So many people I've worked with are so unhappy in their role. They were paid great and they loved what they did, but they didn't like anybody they worked with. And that's just such an important side of it, especially when you're having to deal with adversity like we are today.
Actually kind of segues perfectly into our next question. So someone's wondering what advice you guys have for new grads that are job hunting during the pandemic, and how they could stand out. Travis, you told us quite a bit already. Do you have any other advice you want to add?
I'd like to say I'm a little bit out of touch with this question, so I'll start, because I think Taheer and Ebby can probably do a better job. I think my only thought when I think about this is, because navigating what we're going through right now is crazy, is the only thing I can think of is I hope like everybody has in their mind maybe what they want out of a job or a career, or to set their path in a certain direction. And because online resources are quite strong these days, my thoughts are around like if I think of, I'm just going to pick hydrogen. If I pick hydrogen, if I want to be in the hydrogen market, what does that look like? So do I get myself, so many conferences went online, and as a new grad, we don't have any money, like we have a bunch of student debt, and it's like, how do I learn and get engaged in industry? And I think about, like, I'll take hydrogen. It's like right now I actually don't have to travel. I don't have to travel to a conference. I don't have to fly to some fancy city to do that. I can actually do it online. A lot of stuff is getting much more accessible because it is virtual. And it goes back to like, do you get into a conference? Do you hear from companies? Do you hear from people? Do you use, well, Taheer said the chat thing didn't work. I haven't had too much experience there. Maybe that doesn't work, but how do you interact and figure out what could be an interesting play for me? You can research it further and then try and get in there. And it's going to be a combination of research and perseverance. I don't have a lot else. That's just what comes to mind for me. So, yeah.
I can go next, since I graduated a little bit earlier than Taheer, so he can go last. I would agree. There's research and perseverance is definitely the biggest factors, I would say. Like Travis mentioned, there's a lot of online conferences right now, and as if you're still a student, there's usually like cheaper prices for students. So it's a lot of times I'll go online as like when I'm working right now and I look at the price and I'm like, oh God, no. When I look at the student prices and I'm like, I could do that. So I would definitely suggest looking at some of those conferences in the industries that you're interested in. Look at the student prices to see if that's something that you can afford at this time. So for me, it was really interesting because as I said before, when I graduated, I didn't have a job, and I was continually applying for jobs. But I also knew that I couldn't stay at home and do nothing because I would literally drive myself insane. And at that point, I wasn't really thinking about like online courses or learning more skills or anything like that. So I actually took a job for 6 months working at Tim Hortons, just really close to my house. And it's a way to make money as I'm sitting at home and continually applying for jobs. I mean, it gives you a really, really, like you're really grateful to the people in the service industry because a lot of people are rude. So I think there's no shame in having to do something on the side while you're trying to pursue your dreams. I would definitely say see what other skill sets you can gain. There's a lot of online courses that you can take. Taheer is learning Python, R, VBA. I'm learning Python. I hate it, but it's okay. I'm still learning it. But yeah, I would say a lot of perseverance, keep working hard. There's no shame in doing something on the side. And yeah, and I think a lot of companies will actually appreciate that at the end of the day.
That's awesome, Ebby. I 100% agree with that. What you just and what Travis said as well. I agree with that. Maybe finding a side job that you want to do because you can always leverage transferable skills dealing with customers. Like Travis said, he does that. Those transferable skills are always important. But also, I think you can look at those virtual events, the like the conferences. I know also the U of A has some virtual career fairs coming up. As well, I think your best friend is LinkedIn. Make sure you're set to open on LinkedIn that you're actively looking for jobs. That new green open to work, the fancy thing that they have on there now, it looks pretty sleek. And consistently update your profile with any courses you're doing. One heads up, if you do that 1 month free trial of LinkedIn Premium, you'll get the entire month access to LinkedIn Learning. And I was lucky enough to have access through ATCO for a few months, and it's an excellent resource for courses, not just those technical ones like Python, R, VBA, etc. You can learn leadership, communication, critical thinking, a whole slew of different skills that you wouldn't necessarily think come out of an online course, or at least I didn't. So I would definitely recommend if you want to really set yourself apart, taking that 1 month of LinkedIn Premium and really leveraging those courses because they are great. As well, maybe I can help out is I use Udemy. There's also edX, Coursera. Those are really, really good resources. Some of them are paid courses, but on Udemy, you can get pretty much any course for $15 or less, just in case if there's some capital constraints or anything like that. Discussion boards, forums, reach out to previous employers. Just really put yourself out there in every sense, aside from leaving your house because we're kind of constrained about that right now. But yeah, and like Travis and Ebby said, just persevere, stay positive. Something will come along.
I did have one more thing to add in terms of networking. So I also have attended, I don't know how many, but at least one conference during this pandemic. And I would say the networking in breakout rooms worked really well because you had to have your camera on, you had to have your sound on, and you were just not face-to-face interaction, but as close as you can get to that. And then a lot of those people, I followed up with them on LinkedIn and added them on LinkedIn. And if you're job hunting, I would say follow up with like, hey, I want to chat about the event. Can we meet up for a virtual coffee? Something like that. I don't think there's any harm in that, especially since they're also there to network. So they're not going to shun you, ideally.
Perfect. That was a great answer from all of you. I guess our original question we asked if you guys are satisfied with your job, and you all said yes. So my next question coming from the chat is, what aspects of your job do you find frustrating? and what steps have you taken to make those more bearable? I'll give you each a second to think about it, and then as soon as you come up with one, just go at it, just tackle it.
Yeah, I can maybe speak to this a little. As a new EIT, you're kind of just getting into the groove of working, and you're learning all those little nuances of your job. And one of mine is the financial forecasting and all that when I'm doing projects. I'm not the biggest fan of it. So the way I do it is I make sure I have tracking sheets and lots of them, unfortunately, but try and keep them all organize and track exactly what you have to do on a day-to-day basis, your to-do lists, all that. As well, another one is when you're using Excel, and this is kind of one of my big reasons why I've pushed myself to learn VBA, is because there's a lot of things that are done, and you can easily automate them with a VBA and putting in a macro or something like that and just automating. And I think that's also kind of going with a general trend in the world where automation is becoming much more important, and trying to do that in a smaller pieces in your days also helps you build up those skills as well. So yeah, those are kind of the big things that I find are a little frustrating, and just finding ways to automate them is what I try to attempt.
I would say, like when you switch into a new role, it's almost like you're starting, I wouldn't say starting over again, but in many ways it feels like that, like you've just become an EIT all over again. And so one of the things is that you have to take time to kind of build rapport with your manager over again, and figure out their working style and how that meshes with your working style and what that kind of looks like. So I would say that was one of the frustrations I had earlier on, was I just couldn't understand what my manager was doing. But over time, I was like, oh, I understand, and I like it. I like what he's doing. I was really frustrated for no reason, honestly. But one of the things that a lot of times he wouldn't necessarily do was like give me like a clear deadline. And so he'll be like, oh, I want you to do this task. And I'm like, okay. And so I'll start doing this task, but like I don't work well like that. Like I need a clear deadline. If not, I will push it down. I will just procrastinate like anything. And so when he would give me tasks now, I'm like, okay, when do you need it by? He's like, oh, and you can give it to me in 2 weeks. I'm like, perfect, thank you. That's exactly what I needed. I know when I need to get it done, and I can give it to you as soon as I'm done. So that was one of the things that was like frustrating for me. Normally he's pretty good, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And so I'm just like, I need to set one for myself, and I will tell you so that someone will hold me accountable to it.
Mine's probably this would have been a lot answer for me a few years ago, but today in a leadership role, the greatest challenge or frustration or whatever you want to call it is definitely motivating. You're so much the bearer of bad news, probably more than you wanted to be in the last, whatever, 15 months, 14 months, 13 months, whatever we want to call it, that you're still there to be the motivation for everybody. So that's a real challenge for sure. Is you need to show up, you need to pick everybody up, you need to give them a vision. And back to the whole human interaction thing, you can't do that at the water cooler. You can't do that in the staff kitchen. You have to do it through this type of interaction, and it's really hard to be genuine in that. So definitely a great challenge, right? Is people look to you for the guidance and the leadership that you need to provide them, and generally there's so much negativity around that. It's harder to pick people up for sure. Definitely.
Those are all great answers. I think that's everything we have in the chat right now. I'll pass it back over to Rachel for some more questions.
Perfect. Thank you for your answers, and thanks to everyone in the chat who had questions. If you have more at any time, just feel free to throw them in there and we'll get right to them. But we have another question here for any of the panelists who have something they'd like to share. But what is one of the most memorable projects or work experiences that you've been involved with so far in your career? And again, feel free to jump in once you have something in mind.
There's I'll share something really quick. There's something really fortunate that we're working on right now at my organization. It's actually not a past project. I've had quite a few good past experiences, but the one right now, it's such an exciting thing that kind of stumbled across. Obviously, it was a passion and a desire, but there's stranded energy in northern Canada, and we're developing a project right now where we're going to kind of resurrect that energy that got basically stranded and isolated when we found. Oh, my lights changed in the office. When we found all these natural gas resources and oil resources in the southern part of North America, it really made northern Canada really isolated from everybody, and all of those assets got stranded in the north. And we're part of a project right now where we're trying to resurrect one of those projects to really just help out the local communities. So it's an indigenous led. We're a technical kind of partner in the whole thing, but it's an indigenous led. It's for their own people. It's an energy poverty, job creation. It's kind of like a built at home, great story. It still has a lot of things to get through to be a reality. But it's an exciting time. I would say it was one of the huge ways to get through the pandemic because we've been working on it already for 8 or 9 months. And it was a nice distraction to everything that was going on in the world, where we had this really exciting story to develop. So yeah, anyways, that's been fun for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm just going to fix the lights. 1 second.
I could go next. I would say in my first rotation, where I was doing piping design, which I love, I got the opportunity. It was really early on actually when I started the role. They were like, "This is your project." I think it was worth, at the end of the day, I don't remember how much, $100,000 maybe for construction at the end, which I found out like after I left. They constructed it after I left the role, but so I was given the task and I was thrown into my first meeting, and my manager, he was like, "You're running the meeting," and I was like, "It's literally like maybe my third day, but okay." So I ran this meeting with operations and with process, with maintenance and engineering, to kind of figure out exactly what we're trying to do and where we wanted to run piping in order to, it was for an area in tank farm to drain the tank a little bit faster. And I was like, oh, that sounds really boring. And then we actually looked at the scope and it was actually much bigger than I expected it to be. And we were also trialing work with an EPC. Are they an EPC? Well, yeah, an EPC. And so I was essentially, it was my project. So I was essentially the product manager for it. And I had to take this, he was a designer in the EPC, probably somewhere in his 40s. And I still had no clue what I was doing. And I was like, this is what we need you to do. And this is the design that we need you to do. And I would check his drawings and I would like tweak his bill of materials. Did I know exactly what I was doing? Not necessarily. But I asked a lot of questions and got a lot of help from the people around me. But it was really interesting to have the opportunity to work on something that was so big, so early on. And actually, they sent me pictures after of like when they built it, and I was really happy.
And Taheer.
Yeah, so I haven't worked on a crazy projects, but I did have one in 2020 that I think will stick with me for the rest of my life because of the challenges I came across during it and kind of one of the initiatives I took on during that project. So we were just doing some integrity digs where we had done an inspection. We identified some areas for further investigation. And so we went down out there and we found something that we had never seen before. And this was probably maybe my 5th or 6th integrity dig. So I wasn't used to looking at code as much as I had to in that sitting. So what actually happened is ATCO typically doesn't install a specific type of sleeve when they do their projects. And so I actually decided, considering a whole bunch of different project aspects that were still pretty new to me, like customers, where we're at, resourcing from construction, resourcing from our operations, cost, of course. And I kind of worked together with a few of my seniors and some of my colleagues to put together this custom sleeve that we designed. And so I was actually in charge of procuring, manufacturing it, getting it installed. And so this whole process was, no one had done it before. Of course, I had never done it before, not in any of my previous experience, and it was super challenging. There was a lot of hair pulled out. I'm surprised I still have this much hair. And it was super challenging, but looking back on it, I was really proud because I created something that wasn't just applicable for that project, but for the entire company as a whole. And I think those projects that provide those unique opportunities, and when you grab those opportunities, you take advantage of them, those are the ones that are the best ones. And that's why that one will stick with me for a very, very long time.
Thank you all for sharing. I'll ask another question here while we give people in the chat another chance to ask any questions they might have. And then we'll move on to wrapping this up, and people can get onto the networking event as well. So what should somebody with little technical experience throughout their university degree do to get their first job? And what are some good ways to add experience to your resume that employers might be looking for? And again, anyone can kind of jump on this if you have any ideas or tips.
Can maybe take a bit of a stab at this. I think most of the people here are students, and I personally, I don't think in your first job that they're looking for you to be completely technically adept. I think that's the farthest from what they want. I think what they're looking for is someone who's enthusiastic to learn and really passionate and is ready to hit the ground running, and not necessarily in a technical sense, but just wanting to go and keep going. But if you did want to expand your technical expertise, I'd say if you're still in school, take part in those technical clubs. If you're not still in school, then do those courses. They're not limited to coding courses and machine learning and all that. There's a bunch of technical courses you can take as well, and some of them have student discounts. I haven't looked into any of the industry offered ones, but more informal areas like Udemy, Coursera, edX, there's a bunch of ones offered on there if you want to shore up your technical skills. But for me, I think in your first job, I don't think they're necessarily focusing on too many of the technical skills outside of what you learn in university, as well as during your co-op terms. Please correct me if I'm wrong though, because I'm still fresh in the industry. Oh.
Yeah, I think Taheer kind of nailed that. Yeah, when you think about, like, it doesn't matter what company you go to, and it doesn't matter what experience you have, you're gonna have to learn something. So that drive and that willingness to learn something is going to be key. Obviously, kind of touching back on a whole bunch of things we touched about, I kind of go back to you probably have a desire and something you want to focus on in your career, and I think you can find the resources, industry conferences, online courses, stuff like that. Like, you can probably get more knowledgeable in the topic for sure. If it's a passion, it's very easy to do because it's something you're going to want to learn about and read about. So yeah, that desire to learn and figuring out what you can do, which is economical to do while you're looking for that job, I think is all worthwhile. And it gives you that much more of a leg up if you're able to get that interview, because you're going to be more educated on the topic. So.
I agree with everything Travis and Taheer said. And one thing I would also suggest is having like volunteer activities also gives you a lot of leverage when you apply to these jobs. I was one of those people that, like, I don't know if this is one of those people or if it's just me that's weird. I researched all the student groups at U of A before I got there. So I knew which groups I wanted to join before I got there. I was probably in like 5 student groups in the last year of my high school, leading 3 of them. So I was like, yes, I know I want to do student groups. So I was in something every single year of my university, and I was usually in a leadership role every single year. So I think at least for getting that my first co-op, that was very, very important, having that much experience. And it definitely helped a lot when I was applying for jobs, just them seeing like the sheer amount of volunteer work that I did, but also like schoolwork at the same time. So definitely do volunteering. It helps.
That's well played, Ebby, because then they wouldn't have thought you're such an introvert like me, right?
Exactly. My GPA was good, but my volunteering was there.
That's awesome to hear. Okay, as I don't see any more questions in the chat right yet, we can kind of begin to wrap this up a little bit since the networking event starts soon. So this one, again, we'll maybe have a couple seconds to think about it, but what last piece of advice would you want to leave us with, whether that be for a university experience, you're entering the career path, or at your current job? And again, anyone feel free to jump in once they have something they'd like to share.
I can kick this one off as well. I actually thought this would come up, so I thought back over my entire 1.5 year career plus my co-op terms. That took a long time. No, it didn't. And there's one thing that really stuck with me from my very first co-op term, and I was very fortunate to have an amazing supervisor, a great mentor, and played a key role in me returning to ATCO as well. The first thing he told me was, my co-op term will be what I make of it. So whatever connections I make, whatever I ask to do, whatever I go out of my way to do, that's what it'll be. It'll be whatever I make it. Because at the end of the day, I have a base set of roles as a co-op student, but I can add on to it as much as I choose. And that might be a little specific to a co-op term, but I really, that piece of advice really resonated with me. So I've tried to apply it in a broader sense, in that your life is what you make it. It might sound a little cliche or, self-explanatory, but I still think someone else telling you that in your co-op term and really nailing it home that a lot of things are in your control once you have the opportunities that are there. I think it's really important and just to take advantage of every single opportunity to the highest extent. And really, it's what you make of it at the end of the day.
Thank you for sharing that.
I would agree with Taheer. I would say even in this role, even as an EIT, there's like a certain base level of things that are automatically given to me, but like when I have capacity, I ask for more. And I think that's really key, is like, I have capacity. I want to do more. I want to learn more. Never be afraid to ask questions. I think that was one of the mistakes that I made through some of my co-ops, is that I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I just kind of took what they gave me, and I was like, I don't know, Google became my best friend, but like sometimes you need like people with actual technical expertise to help you with things. So like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Definitely, like Taheer said, it is what you make of it a lot of the time. And always keep learning. I think that's really important. As you go forward. I mean, I'm learning Python, but I don't love it, but I'm learning it because it's, yeah.
Fair. And Travis?
I read lots of books, whether I'm looking for inspiration, a distraction, learn about history, whatever it might be. Usually I read a fiction book when I'm busy with work and I just need something to read that's mindless. But I read something last year. Phil Jackson, the famous basketball coach, he won some championships on his own, and then he won 11 as a coach with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, obviously. And the book's called 11 Rings. And he kind of has three. He's a really interesting mind when you think about dealing with challenge and adversity and motivating people and trying to motivate yourself. And I kind of boiled it down to kind of three things that I took from that book. One is ignore the noise, control what you can control. There's a lot of noise these days, so control what you can control. Kind of a meditative thing. This is a big thing with Phil Jackson for sure. He preached it a lot on his basketball teams, and I think it's very applicable in business, but stay in the moment. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Stay in the moment. And then the last one is like even more simple. And I think everybody on this call and in even being here, but be kind. That goes a long ways, right? You don't need to be a jerk to get ahead in life, and being kind will do you much better. So I loved it. That's what I took from that, and it's a great read. So yeah, that's what I would leave.
Awesome, thanks. So that was called 11 Rings.
11 Rings, yeah, Phil Jackson.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as I know, the networking event is just kicking off now. And I don't see anything else in the chat. So I'd just like to take a minute here to thank you so much, each and every one of you panelists, to spend your night to kind of share your experience and advice. It's definitely super meaningful to new grads or undergraduates as we are. So yeah, thank you so much.